Mrs. Wadding.
Miss Sarah Martinez.
Gabriela Les.
I am Miss Orth.
Steve Pratt.
My name is Hillary Palmgren.
On September 11th, 2001, 2 hijacked planes hit both Twin Towers, effectively killing 2,996 people, leaving a mark on everyone who was there while also shocking the entirety of America. Thousands more were injured, and even more were left with long-term health effects, both mentally and physically. The North Tower was hit at 8:06 a.m., and the second tower was hit only 16 minutes later. 2 of the tallest towers in America started crumbling, leaving everyone in panic. Afterwards, it seemed for days that the sky was clear of any air traffic. There was a still quietness in the air. It was confusing, surreal, and unbelievable that this could happen on U.S. soil.
My initial reaction was disbelief, that it had to be an accident.
At first, it was just maybe a bad accident.
At first, I thought, oh, somebody had an accident.
There was no way that I could imagine that what had actually happened. And then just shock as the news unfolded and we began to understand what was really going on, especially because it was bad enough that the planes hit the towers, but then no one would have ever imagined that the towers would have then collapsed.
And then the second time it was, wow, it looks like this is like we're under attack.
All of a sudden, the second building was hit by an airplane. And that's when I started thinking, are we being attacked?
I do remember it was like a mixture of fear and panic because where is the next plane going to hit?
So I remember just being scared, like, what's going on? Why did this happen?
I get scared. I thought it's a third war, basically.
So on 9/11, I was actually a junior in high school, and I actually went to Moon Valley High School in Phoenix. And so I remember I was driving to school that day, and I heard it on the radio that a plane crashed into the World Trade Centers. And on my way to school, it never crossed my mind not to go to school. So this is before we all had phones and everything like that. So I went to school. And by the time I got there, the second plane had hit.
I was in New York and I was teaching at Hebrew Academy for Special Children in Brooklyn. And my assignment was to make sure that every child was taken out from the bus in the morning. And when I get to the first bus, one of the driver asked me, "Did you hear what happened?" I said, "No idea what happened." I said, "Look," and I looked up front. And basically, I could see both towers at that time. And I saw the fume coming out from one of the tower. When we took all the children out from the school, I was still standing in front of the school and checking out what's going on. And I saw when the second plane hit the tower at that time. It was a mess after that.
We just did nothing and just watched the news. And it was just a very somber, sad day.
But we were very aware of the silence because of the lack of airplanes.
Just remember that we were all very scared, a lot of tension, and we were just basically, everybody was glued to the TV that day.
It just made me feel that I was kind of vulnerable.
We used to go to a little grocery store in there. That's where we got our food. And so it was just very strange that this thing that is so familiar to me, but also so known around the whole world, it was now gone, and all the people that went with it.
I was pregnant with my son. I was throwing up. And the nurse said that she needs to take me to the hospital, to my doctor, but basically my doctor was in Manhattan. And that was the hospital that was taking care of all victims. I didn't want to live anymore over there. I lived in New York for 10 years. But at that time, when my husband was outside of New York, he was in Tarrytown. Whatever happened to me, I had to go to hospital. There was nobody that could go with me. He was not allowed to go over the bridge because all the bridges were closed at that time.
I had a lot of friends that lived in New York City at the time, but I do remember one distinctly. It was a friend of mine that I grew up with, but I spoke with his parents a couple of days later, and they told me that he called hysterical because, unfortunately, he was watching the whole thing live. He wasn't that far away from the tower, so he got it up front in close personal picture. They did emphasize that, you know, toward the end, before the buildings came crashing down, people were desperate up on those top levels because the fire was raging down below them and it was coming up to their office sections on those upper floors. And he watched people fall to their death. It was basically, do I burn to death or do I just make it quick? And he was watching people make that decision. And I do remember his parents saying he was hysterical. He was like, I'm watching people fall to their death out the windows.
As a teacher, had students who their mothers were pregnant with them when 9/11 happened and their fathers had died that day.
One of my good friend, coworker, daughter, she used to go to Stevenson High School that was across from the towers. And she said she will never go back to the Manhattan. She said she will never go back. So definitely there's a lot of people with the post-traumatic stress disorder.
You were hearing stories of people who were experiencing racism connected to who was responsible for 9/11. And you'd hear stories of Americans who were getting blamed and getting anger directed towards them just because they maybe happen to look or sound or have a similar name to some of the people who perpetrated those terrible crimes that day.
Yeah, it's just our lives were forever changed after that. I remember thinking about this actually a few months ago, that things have not been the same since 2001, that's for sure.
The one thing I remember that for a week, I did not laugh. I mean, it was just very eerie. You know, even though it was thousands of miles away, we could feel the effects here.
So I think it affected a lot of people's personal life. A lot of people lost their families. And it's something that you cannot forget. We'll never forget.